Well, good morning and good Friday. This is another episode of Freedom Friday with my good friend Sharif and Chris, who will be with us here shortly. Today, we're going to talk about something very important. What if I told you that there was a secret to helping students have better achievement in school, but it's one that we, for some reason, can never talk about? It's totally taboo. That's what we're going to talk about on today's Freedom Friday. Well, good morning, fam. Good morning, good citizens. Welcome to Freedom Friday. You are still not free, but hopefully you will be freer after an hour with Sharif El-Mekki and me. Good morning, Sharif. How you doing, brother?
Good morning. Great to see you. Happy Friday. Happy Freedom Friday.
That's right.
Yeah, I like your hat.
You like it? Organized.
Yeah, that's right. We ain't outnumbered. We out organized. So let's get organized.
Reproduction of a new breed. Stand up. Organized. Well, good morning, everybody. Joy Marie Hunt gets today's first person award for being the first person to comment today. Joy Marie Hunt, you have won a all-inclusive trip to Mexico. No, you sure haven't. I'm sorry. But you have won a good morning. How you doing? Cynthia Rose just popped in. Good morning, Cynthia. Good to see you. Good morning, fam. Everybody else listening and watching, please like and share the show. Get other people through the dough. We appreciate you. Today, we are going to talk about faith in education and the importance of faith in education. I'll do a short setup just, to get the conversation going. But I believe that that maybe this isn't going to be something that you haven't heard before, but you do have to wonder why it is that we never really talk about it, because religion and faith in education makes a difference. It makes a difference in the lives of children. So I want to show you part of what that difference looks like. Let's see if I could share my screen here. And Sharif, this is not going to be, secret to you. Both you and I come from different faith traditions, but faith in the lives of us, in the lives of our families is, it's a given. We just take it for granted that it's something that it's a given, but we don't really talk about it. Even you and I don't even really talk about it. So let me jump back here. Look at this. The effects of religious practice on poor communities. Now, students who go to school, you can see the graph here, weekly, monthly, go to church, I'm sorry, weekly, monthly, or less than monthly and never, have very different outcomes in terms of their drug use and juvenile delinquency, their who they form friend groups with, what types of rates of suicide and depression, everything that they have, but it also has an impact on their education. This is just one chart. There's a better chart, I think, in here somewhere, and I can find it about the effects of education. But here you can just see that there is a where students end up in terms of poverty in their lives after attending church or not attending church is very different. Like what type of outcomes that they have in life. Very important. See if I could find the one that's specific to education. This is specific to educational attainment. So in terms of behavior issues in schools, you can see this is students who attend church weekly on this end and who attend church never on this end. And you can see that there's just a big difference in having behavior issues in schools. Getting a high school degree. This is students who attend church weekly. This is students who attend church never on this end. So completing your high school, getting a bachelor's degree. Same thing, weekly attendance versus never attend on this end. All of these are the general outcomes, but all of these outcomes are magnified for low-income students in disadvantaged communities, meaning that the outcomes are even bigger. Like the differences are even more outsized for students who are living in disadvantaged communities. So there are some things that are underneath this. Attending religious schools has always been associated with doing better, even if you're not religious. So you have a nation of students who attend Catholic schools, for instance, who are not Catholic. It's not just that they're like, it's not just the religious practice in there that is doing better for them, but you've had lots of working class Black and brown students attend Catholic schools for years, for decades, and that has been better for them in terms of outcomes, even when they're not Catholic or even when they're not religious. A big part of that is the peer groups that are formed. And it's not just the peer groups. If you look at the research tells you that one of the benefits is that there's an intergenerational building of social capital, meaning that there are more intergenerational contacts that students have. I think they call it closure, intergenerational closure, which just basically means you have more students who have older people and younger people, like a mix of people, generations, in their immediate closed network of people that they interact with. Whereas many kids, actually, it's their parents and that's it. Like, their parents, maybe their grandparents, maybe one degree away. But in churches, they have like a larger pool to draw from in terms of interactions. Extracurriculars, the things that students do when they attend church, actually adds another layer of extracurricular things that they do in their lives. So, if you don't attend church, there's certain things you don't participate in, and those things that you don't participate in are rich for your development. So this is kind of just like I don't want to go too deep into this, but basically to say that I'm not making this up. There's research that basically says that students who are attached to their faith and do attend church on a regular basis, especially weekly, have outsized gains in their actual student achievement, but also in things like extracurricular, social network building, social capital building, the things that will help them be better in longer term life. And in some cases, these impacts are greater than almost anything else that we try to do for students to help them achieve more and achieve better. So that is the basic starter of our conversation today. Faith is important in my life. Faith is important in your life. We have different faith traditions. Excuse me. But Sharif, not something we can always talk about if the conversation is about public education and public schooling and even teachers, like what should teachers be doing or whatnot. This feels very much like a side conversation, even though many of our teachers are people of faith. Even though the reason why, and I said this to you right before we started the show, some teachers are still hanging on and able to teach other people's children every day is because they have a God to report to, who on the times where they feel bad, they get prayed up and they come in that classroom ready for action. So what do you think about this as a discussion that we should be having?
Yeah, I hadn't thought that it was, taboo or anything like that. But when you started talking about it, when you shared this as a topic for today, I was like, then it started like bringing back memories. I think, one thing about from the Islamic tradition is so, particularly for our sisters, it's so visible, right? And so it is much harder for what we call hijabis, for example, the Muslim sisters who wear hijab or khimar or like a headscarf. It's like they're often able to be seen. So if they're an educator right from the beginning, their spiritual affiliation, their religious practices are like on the forefront. It's not like something if they're be hijabi, then it may be different. However, many, there are many hijabis who are educators, and so it's right on the forefront. But I think about my mother, who was a teacher, and at some point, I don't know if they removed this from the books, but there was something on the books here in Philly or Pennsylvania that said nothing. And I'm paraphrasing, it was some kind of archaic law. Nothing about your religious choice can be shown, can be displayed. And every once in a while, there's a group who latches onto that, and that's their banner that they raise. And they want the district to remove anybody, fire everybody who's refusing to obey or comply. And so you had a lot of teachers tucking in their cross or tucking in their their Star of David and things of that nature. And I remember my mom telling us that her principal came to her and was like, "Oh my God, Ms. Almeki, what are we gonna do? What are we?" She's like, "I don't know what you're gonna do. I guess I'll be home." You know what I mean? She was like, I don't care what y'all like. You do whatever y'all gotta do, but I'll be home because I'm not removing my chemo for you, because that is part of my spiritual belief, my Islamic practices. And so, being steadfast, one, it being on the forefront in Muslim communities, and having sisters, part. And the other part of it is like, we often we pray 5 times a day, and sometimes that is often, most often, it's during the school day, or Ramadan. The month of Ramadan may come through during the school year. So I think for the Islamic, for Muslims who serve in public education, it's more on the forefront of our thinking. My days and my plan, it's even when I was a teacher or principal, I'm looking at like, okay, I need this time to pray. So part of my prep period was prayer before I went to a meeting. If it was after school, if it fell in time of Asr, I'm going to be a little late. But I was fortunate to be in I was just blessed, man. Starting at Turner Middle School, and they were so welcoming. I think I was the first Muslim there at that time. There were others who came, during my tenure there. They were so welcoming, supportive. Like, I remember we took the kids to the Poconos, and this lady made a joke. She was like, "You probably my lead teacher was Mr. Pastor. He was Jewish, and I didn't have an alarm clock. I didn't bring an alarm clock, but he did. And he was like, I'll set it for your morning prayer." Like we were, I was like, I appreciate that. Like it was just, she was like, "Dude, this is a great model. Like you got the Jewish man and the Muslim man and collaborating so that the Muslim man can pray on time." And I was like, yeah, I appreciate that. But that was the community that I was welcome. And I could imagine that many Muslims or people of faith in general do not experience that type of welcoming, that type of support inside their schools.
You know what you just described, and the words you even used, a community. So the school in that way, you're talking about a Jewish teacher who accommodates a Islamic student in a Christian nation. But everybody can somehow coexist within the realms of an educational environment. Isn't that what it's supposed to be?
That. Yeah. Picture that. Like, why? Yeah, exactly.
Is it? So, yeah. I mean, you just described like the beloved society, and that's what a school should be able to do. If everybody's not trying to have their own way. No, we should just be one thing. We're a Christian nation. Well, apparently we're not a Christian nation. We have lots of people of different, we're a pluralist nation. We have a nation of people that come from all around the world. And our schools should probably reflect that. I think on both sides of where this becomes really hard and problematic is, first of all, the separation of church and state is something that somebody right now listening to what we're saying or watching what we're saying or whatnot, it's going through their mind. Separation
as a child, that was always very confusing to me. Like I never quite understood like how that actually played out, because in governmental documents it says "in God we trust." You can see in courtrooms it says things like that, or money, other government institutions saying we separate this, but yet we are this. And I was just and I think some people go to such a extreme they don't even want to talk about it. Where I think again, Islamically, children were always asking me about my faith, what I believed in. Staff were always asking about what my faith was, what I believed in. There were at Shoemaker, for example, sometimes I would read articles about, this person was in trouble. You told me about a brother in Minneapolis. Students were praying, and that all hell broke loose. I'm like, man, I'm glad. I guess that was a thing, because at Shoemaker, kids were praying all the time. Like, can I use the social worker's office? Can I use the auditorium? The Ramadan, they would do it in congregation in the auditorium. But it wasn't, I think it's important that the whole separation is like no one's forcing and no one's barring. And I think a lot of times people don't understand that, right? Like if it's student led, students can do whatever they want. So students want to start a Muslim student association, which many of them do in schools and colleges. They do it. If they want to start a Christian club, they do. I've been in those situations where students would pray every Friday in congregation and invite a local imam to give the sermon. So we call it khutbah, right? Speech. So I think, making sure that adults aren't forcing and we talk about this in anything, political views, religious views, spiritual views, not forcing that on children, not marginalize kids who are different. Like, I think that's the piece. We already got kids being marginalized if they don't buy into white supremacy, right? You get questions. I know I got a D in English because I was questioning white supremacy of my practices of my teacher. So you can only imagine how dogmatic sometimes people are about their spiritual beliefs, or their religious beliefs, I should say, and the potential for marginalization is it's ripe. And so I think we have to be be careful. But I answered any question that came my way.
It's amazing that we have this hill to get over, because you saying that you pray multiple times a day, our kids who go to who are embedded in church at home, and then come to school, having to separate that piece of themselves or whatnot is actually making them live two different realities in some ways, rather than accommodating. I mean, I love this example that you gave. Like, you had a Jewish teacher and you are of the Islamic faith, or you're Muslim and we're in a Christian nation, but there's a way for us all to be together in the school where everybody can remain self-clarified. Like if my praying helps me self-clarify during the day, as a teacher and as an educator and as a system, you probably want that.
Right? My mom used to tell people, she's like, you actually want me to pray. Like, trust me, you want me to tap into my God. Like, trust me, just trust me. You know what I mean? So, and I would crack up. I'm like, Mama, stop talking like that. She's like, no, I need to let them know. Like, don't get in my way, so.
Well, I mean, even if you're a person who doesn't believe, that's not your thing. But someone were to say to you, like, listen, several times a day, I rest my thoughts, I settle myself so that I can self-regulate throughout the day, right? If someone's saying that to you, whether it's Buddhism, whether it's meditation, whether it's wellness, thinking, or whatever it is that people do, it just seems like it would be weird for you to like be against that. To say like, well, no, we don't.
I think you're tapping into my biases, man. If I'm thinking about, like, if I was a grade team leader or a teacher or if I was in a leadership role, and I'm thinking, like, my first reaction, like, I had to literally think about that, and I guess I probably would ask for some more explanation if it was for grounding, because someone's like, oh, I was praying, I'm be late. I'm like, oh, all right. Someone said, I just needed to think and, kind of, it wasn't like religious based. I was like, why are you late? You know what I mean? So I would have to check my own biases, because I do think that there are times when people may need to, pull themselves in and be reflective before they join a community. They may have had a fraught situation, or whatever. And so given, that word that people use a lot, giving grace and understanding. But I think that in the community, you start knowing that, right? How folks tap in, what motivates people, what deflates people, how people are, kind of tap back into their own selves or their spirituality. And then you support them with that, and it's interesting because I remember being at a PD with one of our best teachers. I mean, she was so dope. She did freedom schools with me in one school. Later on, she was a, master level history teacher in another school. And all this time, then at one day at PD, we were just talking about biases and things like that, or, things that may hold people back from deepening relationships. And she was like, I'm an atheist and I've never shared this because I thought you might hold that against me. And I was like, damn, like, why would I hold that against you? And you've known me for years.
Yeah.
I was like, have I ever said anything or did anything? Did I telegraph something that I would hold some kind of bias? She's like, no, you've never done anything. She was like, it was my own thinking, my own perception of what may happen. She was like, you never said.
And
And I was
we
like,
might
oh,
be you might be striking on something there too. Sometimes people of faith or religious people hurt people,
mhm.
with their religion,
Oh man, well, how
right?
much
And it's not,
oppression has been done in the name of religion?
yeah,
All of them.
right. So, I'm taking it that when we talk about this in our frame for today, that
Mhm,
we're talking about people of faith who are in keeping with their faith's
mhm,
real text, and that it's a self practice and a belief system that helps them be better, but doesn't cause them to hurt other people. That's just
mhm.
a frame for today's discussion,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
we have to acknowledge
There's other part to it. There's
that
another
people
chapter.
what
Another
people
show.
do in the name of their gods is
Mhm.
is actually not in keeping with the major text of their religions. As a
Yeah,
matter of fact,
absolutely.
lots of Christians who act awfully unchristian like, and I don't blame lots of other people. Now I'm specifically saying faith. You and I have two different faiths. You just mentioned somebody who it's not really a faith, but it's a human understanding. So we will say the atheist or person, but anybody who spends time thinking about something bigger than themselves that calls them to a different moral attention. Like,
Mhm,
I'm not going to lean on my own carnal understandings of the world. I'm going to lean on something bigger so that I behave in life in a way that is good for society.
mhm,
We should want that for our students. We should want that for ourselves or whatnot. And if we're talking about schools where um, listen, having grown up in church, there's a way that you behave at church. And there's a look someone can give you in church if you are not behaving that way that you're supposed to be in church, right? I feel like that's good training for school in some ways. I mean, this may not be the easiest point to make, but we have behavior problems, I think, a lot of times that are based upon the need for kids to learn self-regulation at school that they haven't already learned before they get to school.
mhm.
And then we have people in schools who don't know how to teach self-regulation to kids who come to school needing to learn self-regulation in school, right? I
That's
think
a
faith can help
massive
with that stuff.
disconnect, right? If
It
I'm
is.
expecting it to happen before you get me, and I don't know how to do it,
Yes.
and then on the other side, if communities are like, we're starting, or we didn't, or school is the place for that, then that's a massive level of miscommunication that can only go downhill. I think the idea of the those graphs that you showed. I think anytime that, and I think there's a lot of, as you said, there's a lot of research that just talks about if folks are connected to something that they feel is greater than them, spiritually, community wise, right? I think all of that. I think sense of purpose. I think all of that can be found in those spaces. Not the only spaces, but these are religious institutions, faith-based institutions, our communities. And I love that you pointed out that intergenerational piece,
Hmm.
because that may be on a larger spread, wider spread. That is probably faith-based institutions are probably the easiest place to find that intergenerational on a larger scale outside, as you said, your family and gatherings like that, or specific events in the community, for this to be like tried and true, weekly, daily, whatever the cadence is, as people tap into their faith-based institutions. I would imagine that that is a place of intergenerational model, different communities, a variety, diversity within the community, right? We're talking about like not a monolith. You can go to places like a masjid or a church or a synagogue and see like, wow, look at the diversity. As a child, as a youth, I'm being exposed to all of these different things, but there's a unifying effort as well, right? And so you get to see the unification and the diversity, individuality and community. It's
Hmm.
probably not a lot of places you get to interact with that on an intimate basis as a child, youth, in particular. And so I'd imagine that all of that plays into, and then a lot of things. Cole talks about code. It's like spirituality, being on code, having this idea that you described, self control, self discipline. All of that is kind of mixed up as gumbo, so to speak, and drive and has a sense of purpose both here, as well as faith-based, beyond the visual.
When I ask you, I mean, we look at this. This is outcome data. Like, these are things that we want to see. We want to see kids with higher grade point averages. We want to see students who get A's in school. We want to see, this is combined, average English and math, GPAs, educational attainment. We want to see fewer behavior problems and more kids getting their high school diplomas and more people getting a bachelor's degree. So if I tell you, and you're a person who doesn't have the same faith as me, and you don't believe in the same things that I believe in, but I tell you that this is the data that young people participating in church actually see this kind of benefit. Do you think it should move you, even if you're a non-believer, even if you believe that there should be a separation of church and state, even if you don't believe that schools have any role to play in being an extension of the young person's home and their home life? Shouldn't you just say, yeah, but the goal for all of us is to increase the outcomes for young people and for students who have been left behind for many, many years. So we're going to look at anything that helps them actually do better, be more self-regulated, get into less trouble at school, and actually make more gains academically. Should it move you, even if you're not a person who believes?
I mean, it depends on what you mean by should it move, right? I wouldn't want people to be like my 7-year-old. We were at at my niece's birthday party, and mind you, she's 7, and she's like, "Dad, I just what's the name?" She's named one little kid. She's Muslim now. I'm like, "What are you talking about?" She's like, "She said something, and I told her, and now she's gonna be." I'm like, "Listen, stay out of people's business. like, get in the car, let's go. Like we're not doing it." Right?
You about to get in real trouble.
Yeah, like what? Like, you proselyte? You're 7. So I think it depends on what it moved. I think one of the things that struck me when I was looking at the data was, as an educator, okay, if this is great, and this is getting to know the community, but my heart, automatically goes to the kids that were not graduating, or kids who aren't having, right, who's still being, left behind, right? Okay, great. This group of students, they seem like they have a stronger safety net. They have access to other opportunities and more people. And what do we do as a school community to support others? And listen, as a Muslim principal, I've spoken. One of my I would say one of my favorite collaborators was Pastor Dr. Damon Jones from Bible Way Church. Plenty of my students were in his congregation, and this brother, he would come check in. He would check on his flock. He would, like, "Hey, I heard," like, for him, education was a part of his work, and I recognize that all religious leaders do not view it this way. I know some imams who don't talk about schools at all, unless something is done where they feel like it infringes on the religious right of a child of one of their constituents, right? And I know others who are, like, very in tune to education. They work in schools, or they started a school, and so that is a natural connection for them. And for others, it's not so natural. Like, they may not think about it, or they have to be forced to think about it. And I often say, in many of our communities, like, we need far more of Muslim folks, to be engaged proactively in the educational system. Like, and many of them are like, "Hey, we don't want to tap in." I'm like, "Great, start new schools, fantastic, start great schools." But in the meantime, many of your children are in the schools that they attend. And so I think all of that, leads to, yeah, we want students to be in community, in school, and out of school. And how do we make that happen? Me, I come from a very spiritual base. I have most of my siblings have studied Islam as serious theological study. I have a sister with a bachelor's degree in Islamic studies. My wife has a bachelor's degree in Islamic studies. My sister-in-law has a PhD, right? So they are all been, just so deeply grounded in it. So it just becomes natural. But it also means that I understand why a child with some kind of spiritual connection has, may have an easier road, but also know that children of color, no matter what their religious affiliation is, they're susceptible to catch hell in our school
Mm.
systems. And those who do not have some sense of strong community outside, you know, catch it even more so. And you were involved, and about Sister Nasia Thompson and her Thompson King and her family, the Muslim girl who got was made to sit down by the referee at a public league basketball playoff game because she wore a kimar, she wore a scarf. And she wasn't the only one across the states to do that. So we have folks who, on the flip side, like, oh, you're going to be marginalized because you express that you have some kind of grounding in your faith, right? And so the community rallied and supported her. And I just wondered, as we were going through that, and people were really rallying around Sister Nasiha because of her leadership, and choosing, like, she was like, I'll sit instead of taking my chemo. Like, no, you're not gonna do. I'm gonna lead by sitting right now. But what I would often think about as we were rallying around her, like, how many children of faith did not necessarily have the community to have that rapid response in the face of oppression that she was facing. How many of them are actually marginalized because of their beliefs, their practices, or perceptions about them and their family and the communities and religious background?
Yeah, there's a dark side to this that I think it's made even more a dark side because you just mentioned something that triggered this thought in me, so I'm going to say it.
Mm-hmm.
The bright side is the story that you tell about the beloved community in a school that you benefited from, the ability to practice your faith and to have a teacher who is of a completely different faith in the world, in the context of lots of bias towards us being a Christian nation, right? Like the Christian religion is dominant in the United States, right? That's the bright side, to be able to build a beloved community where everybody can come and learn in peace, where people can learn together and learn in peace, and they don't have to leave one of the most essential parts of themselves at home. Like, if you think about it, your religion, your creed, your race, your culture, your language, your history, these are all things that are very intimate parts of yourselves. So the more intimate parts of yourselves that can be respected by the place that wants to teach you, that wants to learn in life, probably the better off you're going to be, and the more affirmed you're going to be, and the less of a disconnect from that institution you're going to feel. So we have many kids who walk through school doors that it's a complete cultural disconnect, meaning my culture, my history, my language, my background, my creed, my religion, all of it is disconnected from this place you're putting me. And the teachers are disconnected from it. They couldn't be more different from me in all those things or whatnot. Now that's the worst case scenario. The best case scenario is the one that you described. But let's talk about some of the downsides a little bit. We'll start with the story that you just told about the young woman being mistreated at school, right? And here in Minnesota, we, CARE, which is our group that pays attention to those types of outrages, right? Yeah. So CARE has had multiple cases and lawsuits against some of our schools here. I'm in an area where the lawsuits were based upon white boys were chasing down Muslim girls and rubbing bacon on their head at school and bullying them. And they were being told by the school staff, they don't mean nothing by it. You just really got to, like, if you want to make it here, you really have to develop a thicker skin. There were teachers, teachers, listen to what I'm about to say, Sharif, teachers who were giving some of the kids, some of these same white boys, air freshener cans to spray at them when they would walk by, and thought it was funny. There were parents who were coming down and complaining to principals that these people even existed in their schools and that they might be doing some of that Islamic stuff during the day. right? So they sued and they won, right? And as you know, Keith Ellison, who was our congressperson and who's now our state attorney general or whatnot, and we have Ilhan Omar or whatnot. We have like notable people in government here who can hear these stories, but they have to bubble up first. So these kids were suffering this in silence in the school district in a contained. So they were having hell every day, getting in fights, being bullied, being called names, having their hijabs ripped off, having bacon rubbed on their head by angry white boys, being sprayed with air freshener or whatnot, right? And I don't, whatever argument you have about the
supported and endorsed by teachers and educators, like
teachers and principals and parents, right? And I don't want to hear anybody say, oh, well, this because you live in Minnesota or you live far out or, blah, because you can say, well, that's just Mississippi or that's just, no, I'm sorry. If you track these cases, these are religious based.
They say from Minnesota to Mississippi, from California to Connecticut, it don't matter.
It could be the whole country, right? But it's not the beloved community for these folks. I want to show you a story that I've told you about before. So teacher questions Muslim practices at a charter school. So what we call TISA Academy, which was TISA Academy, was a K-8 charter school here in Minnesota. And this school was one of the best performing charter schools in the state. Actually, it was like 90% in poverty, 90% kids of color, and almost that in the same level of proficiency. Like almost everybody's proficient in this school. There's a substitute teacher who came into this school and saw that the kids were being allowed to have what you said earlier. They were being accommodated for their prayers. And she leaked that story to Catherine Kirsten, who's one of our state's most rabid, homophobic, Islamophobic, anti-Black, conservative writers in the state. Like she wrote a story about discipline called "No Thug Left Behind." Right? When she talks about anything having to do with anything they're teaching, she was anti-CRT before anybody knew what any of that was. She's been doing this for decades.
She's the harbinger, right?
So they got this story to her. The white substitute teacher got the story that kids were being allowed to pray. She writes a story around how if this were a Christian school, it would be gone in a heartbeat. And in this, she's basically making the argument that, you can see down here another thing is she wrote, taxpayers are footing the bill for an Islamic jihadist type school or whatnot, right? Because the kids were being accommodated for their prayers every day, for their ability to pray in school. This never stopped with this school. So I just want to fast forward to the story. Assad Zaman, who was the school leader, he's also imam here in Minnesota, good friends with Keith Ellison or whatnot. He should have had all the political cover in the world to keep doing what he wanted to do, but this became one of those things where white people never let it go. They rode this school to death, and now we don't have this school anymore.
And it was high performing for students and safety.
It was the highest performing in the state.
Emotionally,
highest performing school
for children.
Highest performing school in the state for kids of color.
Yeah,
doesn't exist because one white teacher went there and didn't like what she saw. She leaked it to another white woman outside of her, who's a Christian woman, whose kid goes to a Christian school, a Christian private school. And they made a story of it to the point where the school just couldn't catch a break in any direction, and it became a bigger story. Now, people who read into story,
and all that kind of stuff just started shrinking and whatnot, right? So,
and meanwhile, just let me say, I want to show you this school. I just want to show you this school. I'm not going to, I'll tell you about it, but Friendship Academy is another charter school here in Minneapolis that does very well with Black students. And we almost closed the school. When I was on the school board, this was up for closing because the results were so bad. But they asked us for a reprieve, and we gave them a reprieve. They brought in a highly experienced retired Black principal to turn the school around. Now it's one of our best performing schools in the city for Black kids. It's like a very, everything is going much better than it ever had been there. But if you can just look at the picture here, this to the left is the school, and this to the right is the church that supports the school. And in between it, you can see there's a walkway. So
That
this
separation
school,
of
it's separate but equal, I guess. I don't know. But one of the turnaround parts of this is this church, the pastor was a lifelong educator. He came from Mississippi. His parents were educators, so education was big to him. And his congregation rallied around this school and provided a lot of support to the kids there, or whatnot. And you can see the distance between the two, or whatnot. Like, this is a Christian example. Now, my previous, person there that I talked about, she would never give a hard time to this, but some people still do give a hard time to even this as a relationship. And it's these kids in this building are thriving because the people in this building have taken it upon themselves to say, we're going to support them.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
They're invested in them, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So many different ways to look at this. Like, even if it's not your faith, should you go into somebody else's house where the kids are thriving and do well and make an issue of it? How ugly is that, right?
That's Karen being Karen, right? Centering themselves in other people's realities, thinking that they know better than everybody else with the lived experience. A substitute teacher, mind you, but just imagine just the families and staff. They're happy. As a public school, they have a significantly high number of Muslim students, and they're accommodating their needs, their desires, but I have higher moral authority as a guest, as a visitor, as a passerby, and more power than all of them combined. White Woman Tears has tons of has massacred many, right?
I'll do you one better, bro. I'm not going to name any names on this one. But it's a name that people would know nationally. A person who is very much responsible for the earliest legislation for charter schools and had a deep hand in it, told me privately once when I asked him why he was against vouchers, why he was against private school funding. His reasoning was because he thought there would be jihadist schools. That tax money would go to supporting jihadist schools. Now, this is a person who put a lot of weight behind charters as families need options and blah, blah, blah.
Right. But yeah, listen, man. And I'm chuckling, not because it's funny. It's sad and crazy.
Right.
It's nuts, right? And I actually have experienced that personally, bro. I think I said what Eight Black Heads was like. There was a faction when I first became principal that was writing letters to the school district. And it was a district school, turnaround school. They were saying I was trying to make it into a Black Muslim militant school, which I just laugh. I mean, it was just like, what are you talking about? Like, it was so crazy. But like, they figure, like, this could be a powerful weapon to use, and to say, and they used it. Later, when I got arrested, some of this I bring on myself, right? As I got arrested at an anti-war protest. I had taken off. I was a sitting principal, and I took off, and I took my families, my mother, my two sons, and my brother. We went to an anti-war protest in the George Bush era, and ended up, getting locked up. And there were folks. I remember this woman blogger. She wrote this long couple pieces, about the issue, and basically saying, like, I had, because I grew up in Iran, that I was tied to terrorism, and why did the district even hire me, and, to lead other people's children. And I was basically going to create like some kind of terrorist cell because of it. And me being arrested at a protest, a Black man, mind you, being arrested at a protest that was mostly white, but the Black guys got arrested. This was evidence to her that was what was afoot. Fortunately, the superintendent and a group of black educators, Association of Black School Administrators, stood up and like, no, the Muslim community, they were at the jail, like, let him out, kind of thing. And so, but how many people who don't have that kind of community support, or the community doesn't even know about it, right? Like, or any of that, and don't have both the political support, the collegial support, as well as the community based, is that's what alarms. Anytime something happens like that and we're able to survive it, I think about the folks that was just devastated by it or destroyed by it. But yeah, like I've had that same thing, so I could hear his voice echoing in the experiences I've had with, the letters or the blog or, all this kind of, craziness,
It's funny that you should say that part, because we've been talking mostly in this conversation about the benefits for students, but not necessarily the benefits for educators also. And educators doing a very tough job every day. Listen, this show is about the people of faith. This is not the show for you if you just believe that that's a bad premise, period. Like you shouldn't have a faith, or you shouldn't, religion's not part of your life, or faith isn't part of your life. Cool. But for educators who it is, it's one of the things that helps them stay strong in the role that they're doing every day. Yeah, it's a part of their daily work. So whether I'm of their same faith or whatnot, I'm mature enough to understand that it's not about what faith I believe in. It's what works for you. And if your faith is helping you stay grounded, to stay fresh in the work that you do, to feel like you have a well to tap into on your hardest days, on the days where the work is getting to you the most, and that over time, it keeps you in the job longer because you have something to tap into. Listen, we all get frail. We all get weak at times. And if there's nothing there, if the well runs dry, then you quit. Now you're done. Right. So if there's something in your well, I know this from social services and other high burnout jobs, is that people who have something they can tap into that makes them feel rejuvenated or like they've gotten some new meaning for the day or whatnot, probably will stay longer. Right. So for educators, I do want to offer this up as something that educators might think about. Teachers who pray. Marilyn Rames, our friend and colleague, Marilyn Rames. Teach Pray Lead, she runs an organization called Teachers Who Pray. And I think it's meant to build fellowship around the idea of what I just said was, this is a part of your life. It's a part of what makes you better. It can help you be better in your profession. And if you can find others who are like you and like-minded and then have fellowship with each other, you might all be better off for it. So I just want to point, I want to provide resources at times. So if this is you and this is an educator, or you're an educator who feels like you would like that type of fellowship, check out Teachers Who Pray. Marilyn also has a book, and I should find that actually. I thought she might have a link to it here. I'll find it for you all. And it's basically called Learning from the Master. And it's about Jesus as a teacher and how it informs her understanding of teaching in her role. And then also there's one more. This book, Educating All God's Children. Nicole Fulham is someone who started an organization years ago called the Expectations Project. It's a faith-based organization that helps teachers be leaders, and not just teachers, but educators, decision makers, others be leaders in creating community around all kids needing to have like a great opportunity to learn and education. But it's a faith-based perspective in a non-faith-based institution like public schools. So it's not preachy, it's not any of that, but it's just basically, if you are a person of faith who's saying, what can I do to support public education, public schools, and public school children or whatnot? She provides you a bit of a frame for that. So just wanted to offer two, what I think are kind of like strong resources for those who, this isn't about proselytizing. This isn't necessarily about like trying to win hearts and souls for Christ. That's not what this is. This is, if you are a student or an educator or person in public schools who's asking yourself, how can I have a frame for helping, for doing better and helping others do better? That's what this is. That's why I wanted to offer those as resources. I did want to point to, okay, so I'm just going to point to one thing that I think is a positive. I'm going to point to a positive, and then I'm going to ask you about something that complicates the conversation we just had. So a little bit. So here's the positive. I have a friend named Vikas who runs an organization called Key Hubs. They deal a lot with social network stuff. And Vikas has had an interest in education before, and he runs a plant a tree project. He started with something super small, like I believe trees are important and whatnot. And he started selling
to the tree huggers.
I mean, he is planners. Like, you should see his nonprofit that he started around this. It started super small, just with his own kids planting, individual little sprouts or whatever, these little trees. And then his friends wanted some and it grew. And now it's a full blown, like he's planted thousands of trees now.
Nice.
But Vikas is one of the most like unusually peaceful and calm people, a lot like you, Sharif, where, I had to wonder, like, where did you come from, man? Like, you must have had some really different experience than me because you are so peaceful. And he told me about the school he attended in Iowa. It's the Maharishi School. And this school was actually started in the 60s by the Maharishi, who started a school in Iowa, of all places. And kids like, the kids of the Beatles went there, or, it's like, became a thing to go there. And when I looked at the school, I'm going to go visit it, but it's a boarding school that focuses deeply on inner development. They have a lot of like, mindfulness stuff before mindfulness stuff was cool. And their mornings are very, grounded in mindfulness or whatnot. Right. He is one of the most self-regulated people I've ever met in my life. Like, you don't jar him, you don't move him. He doesn't get loud like I do, type of thing or whatnot. And this school this isn't Christian school. This isn't a Muslim school. This isn't a Jewish school. It's another school though that has thought deeply about the internal life of people and how you help people be in control of that on their own by practice. Like by practicing something bigger than themselves. And I think this is one I bring up because it could stoke all your prejudice. Like, maybe you're not into this. This isn't your thought system. This isn't your faith system or whatnot. But in all the faith systems that I talked about today, you have to keep coming back to, does it work for the young people, right? Does it work for the students? So, I would say to you, Sharif, I don't know why I'm giving you the whole screen. I would say to you, like, this particular school, looking at how you and Vikas and others walk in the world with a peaceful disposition is a goal that we would want for all of society, ability to create people who can walk with a peaceful disposition that's open to all, right? And we're talking about people of faith, though. Like, you're not walking around trying to like convert people to anything and beat them over the head with your personal faith, but you're very welcoming to others. So this is just like a glow up part of what I wanted to say. Like this is upside, but now I'm going to choose silence. Yeah. Now I'm going to go the other direction. Just quickly, because we don't have a ton of time, I'll say this. This is what people really worry about. So Rebecca Klein did a story on the textbooks and the curriculum that's being taught in lots of schools. And she found out that the textbooks, they looked at tons of these textbooks, and these textbooks are anti-Obama, anti-Hillary Clinton, anti-science, anti-evolution, just like pro-Trump, pro-white nationalism, reversing all the stories. Basically, Jesus rode a dinosaur with a machine gun is kind of like what millions of kids are being taught in private schools, private Christian, white nationalist Christian schools. This is the big fear. When people hear about faith and, me bringing up faith or you bringing up faith as something positive in education or whatnot, this is the type of story that makes people want to say we need a separation of church and state. And oh, by the way, even with that separation of church and state, we need to be watching what these people, so-called people of faith, do. So this is one story that I wanted to pull up that chooses violence. The other one is this. Let's go to Pastors for Texas Children. Pastors for Texas Children is a group of pastors that now are expanding to multiple states, and their entire framework is separating church and state. These are pastors who don't want any public money being used to support charter schools, school choice programs, private schools. They're basically working with Diane Ravitch. They're a front group for the unions. And this is another, complicating factor. That's all I'm bringing up right now is complicating factors to this whole discussion that we're having, because it's not as clean and easy as we've been describing this. Well, faith is great for kids and it helps kids do better or whatnot. No, it gets very political very quick. So if somebody's been watching this saying like, here are pastors saying we don't think there should be any school choice and blah, blah, blah. I have pushed them multiple times on, I even wrote about it. What God is served by pastors who deny families inroads to the very education called for in the Bible, right? Because these are pastors who are like, there shall be no other schools but the public schools. And I'm like thinking to myself, okay, wait a second, because we got the same Bible, bro. I'm trying to figure out where in that Bible it says, don't let the children come to me. Thou shalt not put kids in schools where they will ever meet me. There's no part of the Bible that says that. So I'm like wondering, sometimes with my Christian folks, I have to be like, which Jesus?
Which one you talk about?
Yeah, just so we're clear on this or whatnot. Because
we got to do that with Prophet Muhammad too. Like, which one? Who are you talking about?
Yes.
Like that, he didn't talk, act, sound like that. So
you can see where this gets complicated.
Yeah, I mean, and that first one, man, I don't even know. I think the complication is really simple. Like white supremacy will thrive in different situations, and religious groups can use white supremacy as fuel to launch and to be able to run faster, and amass more power. And so you see that where we can inject and infect children's minds with white supremacy, not just through all the other avenues, but let's continue to use the textbooks. And we know that that's been a long tried method of white supremacists to make sure that the materials themselves are dripping with white supremacy. And so they're continuing that. They just have the new context of laying on number 45 and Obama and all these other, that's just the new context, new wording, but the theory, their religious philosophy has always been the altar that they worship at has always been white supremacy. And so I'm not surprised. We continue to see that, whether it was textbooks saying that, enslaved Africans were immigrants and were happy and all those kind of things, to the things that's in those textbooks that were highlighted in that article. Would love to read that too. Hope you put that in the chat as well. And
I'll
then
send it to you.
Yeah. And then we've had, and I shared this before, NAACP president, who's also in the nation, was at an anti-school choice rally. He was the lead speaker. He was the one who was called to speak. And of course, our students were also there, and they were just like, wait a minute, I thought he's supposed to be standing for Black children.
I know,
and
right?
Isn't that the NAACP and all of these questions? And isn't he Muslim? And all of these questions where the students end up having their own counter rally right there. And I remember the police came over. They had the citizen police or whatever that, supposed to be for like protest and thing. They're like, you don't have a permit, so you guys can't actually I'm like, I'm not protesting. Those are my students responding to the vitriol that they're spouting. Like, what do you want me to do? We're actually just waiting to get in the building to the school board meeting. We didn't come here to protest. We had no idea that there was something planned here. They're just coming to support their school. So, they were basically drowning them out. With their own chants. I participated because, sometimes you got to let the children lead the way. But all of that, so I'm not surprised that some folks are, who say they're grounded in some type of religion or faith, aren't caught up in the madness, and say like, no, this is the only way. This institution, uh, should have your protection, not the children. Start with the
Mhm.
students, and whatever institutions support the students, that's what should be protected, right? Not just this ideological, rigid ideology of institution is the only way. So,
Yeah.
not
But
surprised,
I feel like, as we close here, that that anything that helps young people be better and to clarify how they feel about the world and understand their place in it, anything that helps them feel grounded in something that is positive and shows them a way to be grounded in the world, so that they can make it through the turbulent years of learning. Like you're growing, you're trying to figure yourself out. There's all these things around peer pressure, throughout your life or whatnot. So anything that grounds you during that time, we should all applaud. I don't think we have to be dogmatic about it. There is no one way in my mind. As a person of faith, I have my own faith, my own understanding, my own grounding and belief in the world. I'm mature enough to know that that's not the thing that I need to be out proselytizing everybody else about doing. It's just I need to respect yours too, because untethered people who are untethered to anything except for their own understanding are very dangerous to me. Like people who don't ground themselves in something that makes them get out of their own head and gets bigger than them become very dangerous. They know everything. They create their own moral systems. They create their own systems of logic that are all self-serving and untested by other people, or I don't know what you call, but unburnished by other fires. And that to me is really dangerous. When people stop believing in anything bigger than themselves, I think that opens up a lot of possibilities, negative possibilities for their behavior and things that they can do to the world, because they're only accountable to themselves. There's someone who's listening to me right now who are saying that's exactly what it should be. We're all individuals. We should all be thinking in, just the way that we think or whatever. Yeah, great. The reason we have laws and we have thousands-year-old arguments about morals and values and the best thoughts in life and whatnot. Like, the world didn't start the day you were born, honey. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I hate to break this to you. I doubt what you're going to come up with in your short 20 something years of life is going to outdo what people have thought about in law for many years. So that's just me. I think I like what you just said, though, is white supremacy can thrive in anything. Misanthropic behavior can thrive in anything. Church isn't blameless, and I shouldn't say the church, but any church. No church is blameless. No thought system or tradition is blameless. And there have been wars and bad things done in the name of God's. Those same things have been done in the name of anything, though, right? Let's just be real about it. Like in the name of money, in the name of power, in the name of prestige, in the name of honor or pride or whatever. Like, we've killed people in the names of all those things. But the root of this discussion is young people do better when they attend church. That's just the headline. I don't know. You could do what you want to do with that or whatnot. And schools who don't pay attention to the fact that young people have a life outside of their walls and try to create godless little boxes where nobody is free to kind of be their full selves, aren't helping anybody. That's just my bottom line. What's your bottom line, Sharif, as we end this discussion?
Yeah, I think it is very, very similar in a way, but I'm going to pull out a particular thread that you mentioned, that, if schools are truly trying to serve communities, that means they have to know the communities. They have to humble themselves, be curious and not judgmental, be, interested in the student's development, and who are the folks who invest in that child, And so for me, as a Muslim principal, who draws their values and faith from Islamic traditions, it was a no-brainer for me to partner with Pastor Damon Jones, a reverend, a doctor, a Christian, theologists, and activists in the community in West Philadelphia. And so for me, those aren't competing. Those are that's within community. And to think that as a school with so many absolute strangers working in schools, because you know what? And when I say strangers, I mean like outsider. Like many of them are not from those communities, are not in community with children outside of being in school. And then in there, they want students to shed. They want that student named Muhammad, and they're like, "Can I call you Mo?" Or the child asks, to pray, and they say, "No, we can't do that in a public school." All this misinformation, misguidance, and just downright rejection of a child, a big part of who they may be and what they're bringing their faith that they're bringing to their work, their individual self, how they see the world. Instead of teaching the students how to all work together, they're modeling the exact opposite in so many situations. And I would caution also educators who see a child that has some kind of religious grounding and automatically holding them to even a higher bar and forgetting that they're children. They're not monks. They're not saints because they're Muslim or Christian or whatever. And I've seen that, and I've had to intervene on that on multiple occasions. Well, they shouldn't be doing that. They supposed to be Muslim. Like, they're 13. They're a human being, and any basic understanding of human growth and development and humanity at large means that they're going to make mistakes. But I've had educators say, well, they shouldn't be in the normal growth and development and should not make mistakes because they're Muslim. And why they wearing that if they're going to act like that's not your place. That's not your role. Your role is to help guide and give feedback and coach that child to be their best selves, not the assumption that, being judgmental, like, well, since you're religious, then why you don't apply that to adults. You don't apply that to adults, but you're going to apply that to this 12-year-old middle school child. Like I've had to intervene on that. So that's another part of the darker side of this conversation. And so I would say be welcoming, be inviting, be curious, and whatever it is, respect where children are coming from and their faith, their religious practices. Very much so often the data shows it, anecdotally it shows it, that it can empower students in really massive ways. And so just be careful about how you're treating children because they profess faith. Be careful how you treat adults and educators with how they profess faith. And if you have a faith, if you have a grounding, be very humble and avoid being dogmatic and oppressive and contradictory of the practices that you say you believe in. And it's a journey. Yeah. It's like none of us are perfect, and so we're all going to make mistakes, so.
That's a great one. I think, and always at the end of these conversations, I'm like, oh my God, we could have a totally another discussion on this or whatnot. Absolutely. And we should come back to this. I would say to the left, people on the left, this is one where your prejudice actually starts to shine through in ways like we love to attack the right on their bigotries, like their intolerance or whatnot. But there is an intolerance of faith on the left that sounds exactly the way that right-wingers sound when they hate something, right? So the way that right-wingers talk about CRT is exactly the way that people on the left talk about faith. They have such a demeaning, down the nose, elitist, I know better than you. The way that the right talks about Marxism is the way that left talks about Christianity and religion. And they don't even see it. They don't even get it. They don't even see it as it's happening because nobody does. When people have such dogmatic bias and they're bigots and they don't know it, they talk in a very specific way. Now they can point out everybody else's bigotry on everything else. So this is one of those ones where it's always good to remind the left, no, you're bigots too. I'm sorry, I hate to tell you, I hate to inform you. If you think that bigotry is like it's monopolized by the right, you just haven't lived long enough in a mirror. So I'm going to ask you to get in the mirror and kind of, there's so much bigotry on the left. And this is one that easily hands down exposes more of the left bigotry than anything else, which is why you have the Freedom From Religion and Coalition and the Keep These Out of Schools. The ACLU played a pivotal role in, when I say attacking TISA, that school that I mentioned earlier, the ACLU is run by a guy who is deeply, deeply resentful of all religion. And he took that case on with vigor. Couldn't believe that they were giving these Muslim kids the ability to pray during the day, and wanted to use every apparatus of government to shut them down because of bigotry, not because of some higher moral calling to the law, but
that's the
because of
complicating
bigotry.
part of all this, right? Like some of those institutions that we look like, I thought I was going to have to tap into ACLU. I went with CARE. And by the way, anyone of the Muslim faith who's needing to address prejudice, and particularly in like institution based, and CAIR.org. But yeah, I thought I was going to have to go through the ACLU. I actually had meetings set up, and then I ended up using CARE, but also thinking about ACLU and its freedom. But they also, with vigor, tried to block David Hardy from creating a school for all Black boys. And like, wait a minute, how does that tie? You know what I mean? For them to put it all in a pot and say it's all the same, and not being able to recognize, like, wait a minute, Black boys are having the worst outcomes in the city forever. Yet you're going to band together with others to say no. NAACP, you're going to band together with, like, it's like this kind of constricted thinking, this arrested development, this gross misunderstanding of historical arcs and trajectories and Black prints, these Black blueprints, is remarkable when you think when you analyze it and think about it. But it's some of that same thread.
Well, we can come back to this now for sure, because you didn't create another show, which is around how kicking all religion out of public schools creates its own public school religion in itself. Mm-hmm. And the people who become part of that cult, the cult of public education, the godless cult of public education, who want to keep all of other faiths out of there so that they can create a secular religion within public education in schools. What they don't understand is it becomes an intolerance factory, right? Like, and not an educative one, not one that's educating anybody of anything. Like you're telling people that are part of themselves. So it creates weird, this is what creates a guy who's a Muslim NAACP supporter who's going to a protest for the cult of public education, not representing his own identities. He's a Black person who's a Muslim, who's out there fighting for public education to not have any competition or whatever, right? It creates weird adherence. I'm just going to put it that way. That's what I'm trying to say. Is here. It creates it makes you lose your own identities. Suddenly you're out there fighting for something that is weird. Anyways, I appreciate you, Sharif El-Mekki. This has been another great show.
Enjoyed having this conversation, and I agree.
I'm
with
glad
you.
that you're open to it. Yeah, you were open to it. I was like, okay, well, let's talk about it then. To our friends and family listening and watching, it's been another Freedom Friday, and you are still not free, but hopefully you're freer at the end of this hour than you were when we began. We appreciate you. If you like the show, please share it, like it, and share it to friends and family. That helps the show keep going. That helps us reach more people. So please do that. I did mention earlier the book with the Marilyn Rames book. And I think that I should do it justice now at the end here. It's called The Master Teacher, 12 Spiritual Lessons. And I want to thank Joy Hunt for actually putting the link in the description or in the comments to the book. Here's the book here, The Master Teacher, 12 Spiritual Lessons That Can Transform Schools and Revolutionize Public Education by Marilyn Rames, who is currently working on some deep study, and I'm not going to say where, in an undisclosed location. So look out for more from her in the coming years. That's very important, but she's a North Star on these issues, and her organization, Teachers Who Pray, I think is also a great resource for educators that want to have this discussion that we're having with each other and have more fellowship with each other. So go check it out. We always want to support our people that are doing great and amazing things. We appreciate you all. Have a great weekend. Be your best.